In the waning years of the Third Era, the Empire of Tamriel lingered in a state of fragile repose. Its borders stretched wide, yet its strength was frayed by decades of conflict, rebellion, and the ceaseless march of time. Provinces bore the scars of old wars, cities whispered of long-forgotten sieges, and even the White-Gold Tower, magnificent though it remained, seemed to sigh beneath the weight of history. Among the common folk, life carried on with quiet routine. Merchants hawked wares in sun-dappled squares, children played in the cobblestones, and the echo of hammers upon forges rang in the cool air of dawn. Yet beneath this veneer of normalcy, currents of tension ran unseen, like deep rivers beneath placid waters. Far to the west, beyond the seas that shimmered with sun and starlight, the Somerset Isles had been transformed. Where once the lands had been realms of scattered elven city-states, now rose the heart of the Aldmeri Dominion. Alinor, a nation forged of ambition and magicka, radiant in its unity, dazzling in its arrogance. The Thalmor, emissaries of vision older than many mortals dared to comprehend, sought not merely influence but supremacy. Their reach extended through Valenwood and elsewhere, threading subtle commands and strictures through courts and councils, reshaping politics and alliances with a careful, patient hand. Where diplomacy failed, intimidation filled the gaps, a silent yet unyielding pressure upon the empire and upon all who dwelt within its contested borders. In Cyrodiil, the Imperial City stood as both heart and beacon. White-Gold Tower reached toward the heavens, a sentinel over the lives of millions. Its gilded spires caught the light of both sun and moon. Yet even such brilliance could not shield the hearts of men from anxiety. Rumors whispered through market streets, carried by travelers from the distant provinces. Rumors of Thalmor agents weaving influence into councils, of envoys who demanded unprecedented tribute, of nobles who feared the invisible hand guiding policy. The people went about their daily labors, yet a subtle unease had settled into the air, like mist across the Tiber River in early morning. Faint, but persistent, and impossible to ignore once felt. The emperor himself, aware of the currents shifting in the world, pondered the fragile threads of his dominion. Every province was a note in a vast symphony of power, yet some notes had begun to tremble subtly with discord. The divines who once guided emperors with their blessings seemed distant, their voices like echoes carried faintly on the wind. Advisors spoke in hushed tones of the Dominion's growing might, of fleets assembling in hidden harbors, of emissaries who spoke not only with words but with intent sharper than steel. The calm that had lasted decades was not mere peace, but the fragile quiet before a storm of inevitability, a storm that would test the courage, wisdom, and endurance of the empire and all who dwelt within it. And so the stage was set. Across distant shores and sunlit islands, in the corridors of power and the shadowed alleys of Cyrodiil, the first murmurs of conflict stirred. Like a slow wind that begins in the mountains and travels unseen to valleys below, the currents of war gathered strength, moving inexorably toward the heart of Tamriel. For now, the empire slept beneath a veneer of peace, unaware that its future would soon be seared by fire and ambition. But the Aldmeri Dominion, radiant and patient, had begun its quiet conquest, and that every citizen of the empire, noble and commoner alike, would soon awaken to a world reshaped by the tides of conflict. Across the seas, the Somerset Isles glimmered beneath a sun that seemed eternal, casting light upon cities of alabaster and spires of crystal. Here, in the heart of Alinor, the Thalmor wove their ambitions with meticulous precision. They were not merely rulers, but visionaries, architects of a new order, confident in their right to guide Tamriel according to their ideals. Every law, every proclamation, every envoy sent to distant lands carried the subtle signature of dominance, a quiet yet persistent assertion of elven supremacy. Where swords had once enforced will, now diplomacy, intimidation, and cunning reshaped the world with equal, if invisible, force. Valenwood, with its vast canopies and labyrinthine forests, became a jewel in their crown. The Dominion's influence seeped into the councils of the Bossmare, guiding decisions without open conquest. Ambassadors spoke softly but carried unspoken threats. Envoys offered gifts that were simultaneously burdens, woven with subtle enchantments that encouraged obedience. Even in Elsewhere, where sands stretched under an unforgiving sun, the Dominion's shadow fell across city and caravan alike. Merchants found themselves paying tributes not requested but demanded, while guilds and noble houses bent their ambitions to align with the subtle currents of Thalmor influence. In Alinor, the heart of the Dominion, the Thalmor's councils thrummed with purpose. Archmages and high chancellors deliberated upon strategies that reached far beyond borders, contemplating the ways in which the empire might be reshaped, its faith curtailed, and its sovereignty diluted. To outsiders, their actions seemed measured, almost peaceful. Treaties proposed, demands presented, gifts offered with the soft veneer of diplomacy. Yet beneath this facade lay a current of inevitability. The Dominion did not merely seek compromise. It sought control, not through open conquest alone, but through the quiet erosion of autonomy, the slow bending of wills until resistance became unthinkable. Within the Imperial City, news of these subtleties traveled like whispers through candlelit halls. Senators and nobles debated the appropriate response, each word weighed against fear of escalation. The common people, unaware of the quiet machinations, carried on with daily labor, yet even they sensed the subtle shift in the air. The traders' caravans arriving later, the guards' increased vigilance at gates, the soft insistence that some religious practices be tempered in favor of harmony with outsiders. The empire, though vast and long-standing, felt the first pangs of vulnerability, a sensation as faint and pervasive as the mist rising from the Tiber River at dawn. Every maneuver of the Thalmor was calculated to test the empire's patience, to measure its responses and weaknesses. Where one province resisted, another yielded. Where a governor defied subtle pressures, emissaries would offer enticements that could not be ignored. The Dominion's ascendancy was not merely military or political. It was psychological, shaping minds and hearts to accept the inevitability of elven guidance. Even faith itself, the devotion of mortals to the divines, became a contested ground, constrained and observed, subtly redirected to align with the ambitions of a people who saw themselves as custodians of a higher order. And yet, within the empire, there remained hope. Advisors counseled prudence, generals trained in secrecy, and whispers of unity stirred among those who remembered the empire's greatest victories. The calm of Cyrodiil, for now, remained intact, but beneath it, currents of anticipation grew stronger. The Dominion's rise, though measured and silent, promised a confrontation that would ripple across the continent. In every corridor, every plaza, and every forest path, the distant winds carried the first sense of an approaching storm, a war that would test courage, faith, and endurance across all of Tamriel. The Imperial City, heart of Cyrodiil, hummed with life beneath the gaze of White-Gold Tower. Its streets, polished and worn by centuries of footsteps, carried the rhythm of daily labor. Merchants arranging their wares, children weaving between the legs of citizens, the occasional clang of a blacksmith hammering steel. Yet amid this familiar cadence, an undercurrent of unease had begun to settle, as though the city itself sensed the faint tremors of a distant storm. Whispers traveled quickly, carried by travelers and traders alike. Rumors of Thalmor agents arriving under the guise of ambassadors, of demands drafted in the quiet halls of Alinor, of emissaries whose smiles concealed intent sharper than any blade. Across the provinces, subtle pressures took root. In the lush fields of Unveil and Cyrodiil, governors received letters from the Emperor's advisors, each carefully crafted to signal the Empire's growing vulnerability. In the northern reaches, where Skyrim's cold wind met stone walls of fortresses and keep towers, scouts reported unusual movements in trade and troop convoys, shadowing the natural rhythm of commerce and defense. Everywhere, the Dominion's influence seeped like mist across the landscape, visible not in armies yet, but in the shifting attitudes and measured caution of those who had once acted with certainty and freedom. Even within the walls of the White-Gold Tower, the voices of the Empire were tinged with hesitation. Senators debated in hushed tones, each aware of the Thalmor's increasing boldness. Envoys from distant provinces spoke of subtle infringements, restrictions on religious practices, the curtailing of festivals once considered sacred, and the insistence that tribute be delivered in ways both ostentatious and humiliating. These acts, seemingly minor in isolation, collectively pressed upon the morale of citizens and nobility alike. Every decree carried the invisible weight of scrutiny, and even the simplest decisions became entangled in the shadow of a power that refused to act openly, yet controlled events with a deft, invisible hand. The priests of the divines, once secure in their authority, felt the subtle chill as well. Temples reported decreased attendance, rituals quietly adjusted to avoid offense, and whispers of foreign oversight threaded through the sacred spaces where worshippers sought solace. Faith, a once unshakable pillar of the Empire, now became a contested ground. Mortals wondered whether their devotion would be constrained, whether prayers to Talos or Arche might provoke unseen consequences. It was a tension felt not only in high halls and council chambers, but in the hearts of common citizens, who noticed that the light of the sun and moon no longer seemed to shine entirely on their favor. Across the countryside, from the forests of Bravel to the fields near Laoian, the Empire's spies and scouts attempted to discern the Dominion's intentions. Patterns of trade, sudden changes in road patrols, and the subtle rearrangement of local governance suggested a mind at work. A strategy so careful that it might be invisible to any who did not look deeply. Even seasoned generals debated how to respond, balancing the instinct for defense with caution lest open hostility invite the very conflict they sought to avoid. And yet, amidst the tension, life continued its quiet rhythm. Farmers tilled the soil, children laughed in sunlit squares, and the markets hummed with barter and negotiation. The Empire, though uneasy, remained awake and aware, poised delicately between vigilance and fear, beneath the calm surface of daily life. However, the currents of change were already gathering strength. In the shadows beneath the gilded spires, the Aldmeri Dominion's hand stretched subtly, quietly, inexorably, shaping the stage upon which the coming storm of war would unfold. The day the ultimatum arrived at the gates of the Imperial City was calm, deceptively calm. The sun glimmered upon the gilded spires, casting long shadows through streets already alive with the rhythms of labor. Couriers from the Somerset Isles delivered messages wrapped in ornate silk, sealed with the insignia of the Thalmor. At first glance, the letters seemed diplomatic, courteous even, yet beneath the flowing script lay intent sharper than any sword. Demands for submission, decrees restricting religious practices, and the quiet expectation of compliance from a once proud empire. The emperor himself read the missives with a solemnity that weighed heavily upon the court. Advisors whispered in low tones, debating the meaning and consequences of each word. To outward appearance, the Thalmor offered negotiation, yet every phrase carried an unmistakable undertone of ultimatum. Their patience was long, their reach subtle, but their expectations were absolute. The Empire, already weary from years of internal struggles and border conflicts, faced a choice fraught with peril: yield and preserve temporary peace, or resist and risk open conflict with a foe both cunning and resolute. Across Cyrodiil, the provinces felt the tremors of tension ripple outward. In Cyrodiil, the governor convened councils to prepare for unrest. In Unveil, militia companies drilled quietly, wary of the unknown. Word spread through market squares and taverns alike. Emissaries from Alinar had arrived, and their demands were final. The common folk, sensing the change in the air, spoke in hushed tones of the past glories of the Empire, of heroes long gone and battles long remembered. A quiet anxiety settled upon streets and fields, like mist drifting through the morning air, carrying both fear and anticipation for what was to come. The priests of the divines, too, felt the tremor beneath their sanctuaries. Talos shrines were visited with renewed solemnity. Prayers whispered against the uncertainty of the world. Citizens sought comfort in ritual, their voices rising in unison, a fragile shield against the encroaching tension. Even within White-Gold Tower, the pulse of governance felt different, slower, cautious, attuned to the subtlest shifts in diplomacy and power. Every decision carried weight, every step measured, as the Empire struggled to balance honor, faith, and the need to protect its people from an enemy whose intentions were clear, even if concealed beneath layers of etiquette and ceremony. In the forests beyond the city walls, scouts observed unusual movements. Ships sailing from Somerset ports, carrying emissaries not only of diplomacy, but of influence. Banners moving through the countryside that did not belong to the Empire, their presence a silent message of reach and intent. The Dominion's hand was no longer distant. It was present, brushing against the edges of Cyrodiil's sovereignty like a slow wind shaping the surface of a lake. Subtle, yet inexorable. And then, as twilight fell across the land, the first clashes began. Skirmishes erupted along trade routes and borderlands, small at first, almost imperceptible, yet each one a harbinger of the greater conflict to come. Fires burned in villages and outposts, the sky glowing faintly in the distance, signaling that the Empire's quiet vigilance had reached its first trial. The spark had ignited, and the currents of war that had long gathered now surged forward. In the hearts of men and women across the provinces, a mixture of dread and resolve took root. For though the Dominion's approach was patient and deliberate, resistance had already begun, and the Empire, weary yet unbroken, braced itself for the storm. The long shadows of the Thalmor's ambition stretched across Cyrodiil, and with each passing hour, the inevitability of war became a reality that would shape the fate of Tamriel for years to come. The dawn of conflict arrived quietly, almost imperceptibly. Along the roads of southern Cyrodiil, scouts reported movement. Banners unfamiliar, banners glimmering with gold and green, marking the advance of Dominion forces into territories once deemed safe under Imperial protection. At first, only small villages felt the intrusion, a patrolling contingent here, a sudden requisition there. Yet even these minor disruptions carried weight, unsettling the rhythm of daily life. Farmers paused in their fields, tending animals with wary eyes. Merchants hesitated in crowded squares, and in the cities, the sound of hammers upon anvils grew less constant, as though the people themselves sensed the approaching shadow. Imperial generals convened councils in hastily reinforced fortresses. The news from the borders was troubling. Supply lines disrupted, patrols ambushed, and in several cases, whole garrisons overwhelmed by the Dominion's disciplined, methodical advance. Though the Empire's legions were numerous and seasoned, the Thalmor moved with precision, striking not at the strongest positions first, but at places of strategic vulnerability. Their assaults were measured, almost surgical, designed to undermine morale and test the Empire's capacity for response. Each engagement, though small in scale, sent ripples of unease through towns and provinces alike. In the cities nearest to the border, townsfolk watched as smoke rose from distant hamlets. Children clung to their mothers, while elders recounted past battles, drawing lessons from victories and defeats alike. Priests moved among the people, offering prayers for protection, invoking the divines with voices soft yet unwavering. In White-Gold Tower, the Emperor's council worked tirelessly to interpret reports, map troop movements, and decide where reinforcements were most desperately needed. Even within the walls of the heart of the Empire, the sense of vulnerability was palpable, a quiet hum beneath the usual cadence of governance. The Dominion's tactics were deliberate. Cavalry units struck swiftly along trade roads, cutting communication lines and isolating smaller outposts. Archers perched in forests and hills harassed supply caravans, while mages tested the Empire's defenses with subtle enchantments and psychological intimidation. The people soon realized that the war they had long feared was no longer distant, but immediate. Farms were abandoned as families fled to fortified towns. Roads once teeming with travelers grew silent, and rumors spread that entire regions were now under the Dominion's control, even before any formal declaration of conquest. Yet the Empire responded with equal determination. Legions marched from distant provinces, battalions reinforced border towns, and garrisons were rebuilt overnight. Generals debated strategy late into candlelit hours, balancing the need for decisive action with caution, aware that missteps could cost thousands of lives. Among soldiers, there was a mixture of fear and resolve. Though they faced a foe disciplined and patient, the loyalty to their emperor and the divines lent courage, even as uncertainty weighed heavily upon every heart. As twilight fell, the first major skirmishes erupted along the southern trade routes. Fires flared in distant villages, the clang of steel echoed through forested valleys, and the sky bore faint streaks of smoke that marked the Dominion's intent to seize and control. Though these initial engagements were small compared to the full scope of the conflict yet to come, they carried the weight of inevitability. The war that had simmered in whispers and diplomacy had now erupted into tangible reality, and every citizen of Cyrodiil, from soldier to farmer, from noble to priest, would soon feel its inexorable pull. The Empire, vast though weary, braced itself. The Dominion advanced not with chaos, but with careful, relentless purpose. And beneath the sunlit skies, along the forested hills and fertile plains, the opening fires of a war that would shape the fate of Tamriel blazed quietly, ready to grow into a storm of fire, faith, and steel. The Imperial City, heart of Cyrodiil and beacon of the Empire, stirred with unease as word reached its walls. The Dominion's forces were advancing steadily, their banners bright in the sun, yet menacing in intent. Citizens moved through the streets with a quiet urgency, merchants hastening to close stalls, children guided away from open squares, and the clergy whispering prayers to the divines for protection. The spires of White-Gold Tower glimmered in the morning light, yet beneath their gilded radiance lay tension, palpable in every corridor, every council chamber, every footstep upon the cobblestones. The generals of the Empire convened beneath the shadow of the tower, reviewing maps and reports by candlelight. Scouts' accounts spoke of Dominion battalions converging from multiple directions, their movements disciplined and deliberate. Cavalry units maneuvered along the outskirts, mages tested defensive enchantments, and infantry prepared to hold key gates and bridges. Every maneuver, every decision, was weighed against the enormity of what was coming. An assault upon the very heart of imperial power, an attack that would test the loyalty, courage, and endurance of all who called the city home. Within the city itself, tension became ritual. Guards doubled their patrols, ensuring that the gates remained secure, that supply lines to granaries and armories were unbroken, that the civilians who sought safety within the walls were organized and prepared. Priests moved through streets and plazas, offering blessings to soldiers and citizens alike, invoking the names of Talos, Akatosh, and the divines to steady the hearts of all who awaited the coming storm. Even artisans, whose lives had been devoted to the creation of beauty and craft, found themselves lending their skills to fortifications, reinforcing gates, and crafting tools for defense. As the Dominion forces approached, the first signals of confrontation appeared along the rivers and roads that fed the city. Skirmishes erupted in the suburbs, minor yet telling, as outlying militia clashed with forward elements of the Thalmor army. Arrows darkened the sky, and fires flared in watchtowers and small settlements, sending smoke curling upward toward the heavens. Each engagement, though limited in scale, carried the weight of warning. The Dominion's intent was clear, their resolve unshakable, and the Imperial City's defenders faced a test unlike any in recent memory. The Emperor, observing from the high halls of the tower, felt the full gravity of the siege. White-Gold Tower, majestic and enduring, seemed suddenly vulnerable beneath the vast expanse of sky. Couriers relayed messages from commanders at every gate, and strategists proposed maneuvers that might delay or disrupt the assault. Yet every option was fraught with risk, for the Dominion's approach was measured, intelligent, and patient. The city would not fall due to mere force alone. It would be tested in will, in endurance, and in the hearts of those who chose to defend it. As twilight settled, the first full assault reached the outer walls. Fire flared across the battlements. Siege engines rattled against gates, and the clash of steel rang through the streets. Citizens watched from behind barricades, hearts pounding, while soldiers answered the call with steady, disciplined courage. The sky, once serene, now carried the faint glow of distant flames, and the shadows cast by White-Gold Tower stretched across courtyards and plazas, a reminder that even the mightiest heart of the Empire could be threatened, yet not yet overcome. The siege had begun in earnest. Though the city remained standing, the inevitability of war pressed down upon every stone, every citizen, every soldier. And as night fell over Cyrodiil, the Empire braced itself, knowing that the coming hours, days, and months would be measured in fire, blood, and the indomitable will to endure against a foe patient, relentless, and unyielding. In the aftermath of the first clashes, the Empire, though bruised, found within itself a quiet determination. The Imperial City, still standing despite the Dominion's assaults, became a beacon of hope and resilience. From White-Gold Tower, the Emperor surveyed the scarred streets, noting the courage of soldiers, the steadfastness of citizens, and the intricate dance of strategy and vigilance that had kept the city from falling. Though weariness weighed upon all, a renewed sense of purpose spread through council chambers and barracks alike. The Empire would not yield, not while the Red Diamond still symbolized unity, strength, and sovereignty. Across the provinces, news of small victories and daring counterattacks traveled swiftly, carried by riders and messengers who braved roads scarred by skirmishes. In Cheydinhole and Coral, garrisons reinforced by veteran troops launched operations to reclaim villages seized in the Dominion's initial advances. Archers perched upon forested hills, targeting supply lines and scouting parties, while cavalry maneuvered with precision to intercept enemy detachments. Each success, though measured and cautious, was a spark, a reminder that the Empire, though tested, retained the capacity to resist, to endure, and to strike back when the moment was right. Within the city walls, citizens contributed in ways both grand and subtle. Artisans reinforced gates and repaired breaches. Merchants supplied arms, provisions, and protective enchantments. Priests moved among defenders and civilians, their prayers a quiet shield against fear. Even children, under careful supervision, carried messages or small provisions to those on the front lines, learning early the lessons of courage, patience, and the weight of collective responsibility. In every alley, courtyard, and plaza, the pulse of the Empire's resilience became tangible, a rhythm of life entwined with preparation for the days ahead. The Emperor himself, aware of the precarious balance between caution and boldness, convened trusted generals in candlelit chambers. Maps of Cyrodiil were spread across polished tables, lines of march plotted, contingencies discussed with meticulous care. Advisors spoke in low tones of strategy and diplomacy, weighing every move against potential consequences. It was not merely the strength of armies that would determine the Empire's survival, but the unity of its people, the wisdom of its leaders, and the enduring faith in the divines who had guided them through centuries of both triumph and turmoil. Beyond the city, the first coordinated counteroffensive began to take shape. Legions moved silently along hidden paths, gathering strength, while scouts observed Dominion positions, noting weaknesses and patterns. Small, disciplined units struck quickly at forward elements, disrupting supply lines and sowing confusion. Though these actions did not immediately turn the tide of war, they demonstrated the Empire's capacity for resilience and its refusal to submit quietly. Every clash, every skirmish, carried the weight of determination, each step a note in the symphony of resistance that would crescendo in time. As the sun dipped below distant hills, casting long shadows across the fields and forests, a sense of cautious optimism settled over the Empire. Fires burned not only in response to attacks, but also in celebration of regained ground and courage shown. The red diamond, emblem of Cyrodiil's heart, unity, and resilience, was restored in the hearts of its citizens. And though the Dominion loomed as a patient and relentless adversary, the Empire, fortified by determination, faith, and the bonds of its people, prepared to endure, to resist, and to reclaim what had been challenged by shadow and ambition. Though the Imperial City had been reclaimed and the first successes of counteroffensives celebrated, the cost of these victories weighed heavily upon the Empire. Streets bore scars of fire and siege. Buildings that had withstood centuries now crumbled under the toll of battle. The air carried the acrid scent of smoke mingled with a faint, lingering tang of blood, a reminder that triumph was never without sacrifice. Citizens moved cautiously among damaged walls and shattered bridges, their movements deliberate, measured, as though each step honored those who had given all to defend the city. In the barracks, generals and soldiers alike counted losses. Legionnaires who had fought bravely now tended to wounds both visible and hidden, while messengers carried word of distant skirmishes and the toll exacted upon reinforcements. Morale, though bolstered by victories, was tempered by grief. Families mourned the fallen. Priests and healers offered solace and guidance, invoking the divines to strengthen the spirits of the weary and the hearts of those who would continue the struggle. Even in the glow of hard-won victories, the Empire recognized the fragility of its strength, aware that triumph was always accompanied by shadow. Beyond the walls, in the surrounding provinces, life bore the marks of both resilience and ruin. Farms abandoned during skirmishes had suffered from neglect. Trade routes, though cleared, remained precarious and threatened by the Dominion's lingering presence. Villages that had resisted occupation now faced the slow labor of reconstruction. Brick by brick, timber by timber, citizens moved with quiet determination, repairing what had been broken, tending what had been wounded, and honoring the memory of those who would not return to their fields or hearths. Even within White-Gold Tower, celebrations of success were muted. The Emperor, solemn and reflective, considered the future with gravity. Councils emphasized caution, strategy, and the delicate balance between retaliation and prudence. It was clear that although the city had been retaken, the Dominion remained a formidable, patient adversary. Their advance had been slowed, but not defeated. Their presence still stretched across distant provinces, a quiet yet persistent reminder that the war was far from over. Amid these reflections, the citizens found solace in small rituals. Prayers rose softly in courtyards and chapels. Candles flickered through windows at dusk, and the shared act of rebuilding created a sense of community and continuity. In these moments, the Empire's spirit endured, resilient and enduring, even when the wounds of battle were still fresh. Soldiers patrolled streets with quiet vigilance. Children returned to play in safer corners of plazas, and merchants once again opened their stalls, weaving life back into the city's tapestry. The price of victory, though heavy, brought clarity. The Empire understood the stakes. Every gain would require sacrifice. Every triumph, vigilance. Every act of courage, remembrance. And as night fell upon the Imperial City, stars glittering above spires scarred by fire and shadow, a sense of cautious resolve settled over its people. Though the Dominion loomed, patient and relentless, the Empire had endured. Its heart still beat, steady and resilient, ready to face the challenges yet to come, and prepared to protect the red diamond, the symbol of unity, strength, and the enduring spirit of Cyrodiil. As the war pressed onward, the shadow of the Dominion's influence stretched across Tamriel, touching even the sacred spaces devoted to the divines. Among the most fervent points of tension was the worship of Talos, the mortal who had ascended to godhood, whose name carried both reverence and controversy. The Thalmor, asserting their authority over spiritual as well as temporal matters, sought to curtail devotion, quietly enforcing restrictions on temples and prayers, and subtly monitoring the rights of the faithful. To the Empire, these acts were not merely administrative. They were a challenge to the very heart of identity, a test of resolve and devotion. In the cities and towns of Cyrodiil, priests and citizens alike felt the subtle encroachments. Altars were carefully tended, rituals conducted with reverence but caution, and words were chosen to honor the divines without inciting scrutiny. Communities gathered quietly, their voices weaving prayers that carried not only faith but defiance, the gentle resistance of hearts unwilling to surrender their sacred traditions. Candles flickered in the cool evening air, incense spiraled skyward, and the faint echo of chants resonated in the streets, a quiet assertion that belief could endure even beneath the shadow of imperial scrutiny. The emperor, aware of the spiritual as well as martial dimensions of the war, sought to balance diplomacy with protection of faith. Envoys were dispatched to negotiate with the Thalmor, their words measured, tempered by both caution and determination. Proposals of compromise were offered, seeking to preserve the Empire's sacred customs while avoiding unnecessary provocation. Yet behind every ornate letter and careful conversation lay the knowledge that the Dominion's patience was long and that the true test of sovereignty might arrive not in words, but in action. In the forests and hills surrounding strategic cities, the Empire's armies moved with deliberate care, defending not only walls and roads, but the principles that had long underpinned the strength of Tamriel. Soldiers marched under banners bearing the red diamond, their chants mingling with prayers for guidance and protection. Every patrol, every fortification, every watchtower was both a tactical measure and a symbolic act, affirming that the Empire's endurance was tied not only to the strength of its arms, but to the faith and unity of its people. Diplomacy and war, faith and strategy, intertwined like threads in a complex tapestry. The Dominion, patient and observant, pressed its influence steadily, yet the Empire responded with measured determination. Ambassadors' words were carefully parsed, priests reinforced the spiritual resilience of communities, and generals prepared for engagements that might tip the balance of the ongoing conflict. Even amidst uncertainty, a quiet sense of resolve permeated the hearts of citizens and soldiers alike, a reassurance that despite the weight of challenge, endurance was possible. As night settled over the hills and valleys of Cyrodiil, stars reflecting upon the waters of the great rivers, the Empire's heart pulsed with cautious optimism. The worship of Talos remained alive, prayers continuing in secret and in open devotion alike. The red diamond remained a symbol not only of political strength, but of spiritual continuity, a beacon against the slow, persistent tide of Dominion influence. And as sleep fell upon the citizens of the Empire, there was a gentle knowledge that faith, like courage, could endure even amidst the most persistent shadows. While faith wove resilience into the hearts of citizens, the Dominion continued to shape the war through meticulous strategy, each move deliberate, each advance measured as though guided by unseen hands. The Thalmor, masters of subtlety and foresight, applied their influence with patience, observing weaknesses and exploiting hesitation. Where one province faltered under pressure, another yielded with quiet compliance, and the Empire was forced to respond with equal thoughtfulness, balancing immediate defense with the preservation of morale and unity. From White-Gold Tower, generals and advisors studied maps that stretched across the breadth of Cyrodiil, noting every river, hill, and road that might become a battleground. Cavalry units were repositioned to intercept Dominion detachments, archers deployed along forested heights to disrupt supply lines, and mages reinforced city defenses with wards both seen and unseen. Each action was designed not merely to repel attackers, but to send a message. The Empire, though weary, remained vigilant, capable of measured response, and unwilling to surrender without contest. Meanwhile, the Thalmor advanced with calculated restraint. Their battalions moved in precise formations, exploiting both terrain and intelligence gathered from spies and envoys. Supply convoys were harassed, outposts tested for vulnerabilities, and emissaries pressed subtle demands of loyalty and compliance upon local leaders. The Dominion's strength lay not only in arms, but in their ability to manipulate perception, instilling caution and uncertainty, and compelling the Empire to act with care lest rash decisions invite disaster. The citizens of Cyrodiil felt the tension in quiet ways. Merchants lingered a moment longer over ledgers, children played nearer to home, and families spoke in softer tones during evening meals. Even in the bustling streets of major cities, the rhythm of life carried a new awareness. Vigilance was necessary, for every shadow might conceal movement. Every messenger might bring news that demanded attention and resolve. Yet amidst this awareness, the pulse of resilience persisted, a steady cadence that intertwined courage, faith, and hope into a fabric that the Dominion could not easily unravel. Temples became sanctuaries not only for worship, but for counsel. Priests guided leaders and citizens alike in meditative reflection, encouraging calm in the midst of uncertainty. Candles flickered in windows, prayers rose with the wind, and the soft murmur of devotion blended with the subtle sounds of preparation. The sharpening of blades, the quiet discussion of strategy, the organization of supplies and fortifications. These acts, small yet significant, reminded all that endurance depended not solely on the strength of armies, but on the unity of purpose, the continuity of faith, and the steadfastness of heart. As dusk fell, casting long shadows over valleys, hills, and rivers, both Dominion and Empire paused in a moment of silent reckoning. The Thalmor strategy pressed forward like an invisible tide, patient and unrelenting, yet the Empire's response was equally measured, deliberate, and grounded in determination. In the hearts of citizens, soldiers, and priests alike, there blossomed a quiet certainty. Though the war would be long, the Empire endured. Though the Dominion sought control, the spirit of Cyrodiil, bound by faith, unity, and resilience, would not be so easily subdued. And as the night enveloped cities and countryside, the glow of lanterns and candles illuminated streets scarred but not broken, reminding all who dwelt within that endurance, patience, and steadfastness could shape the course of even the most relentless adversary. In the hush of evening, as the world settled towards sleep, the Empire's heart beat with quiet strength, ready for the battles that tomorrow would surely bring. In the aftermath of relentless skirmishes and careful maneuvering, the Empire began the slow process of restoration and consolidation. White-Gold Tower, though scarred by fire and siege, remained a symbol of resilience, its spires catching the first light of dawn as if to remind the people of Cyrodiil that hope endured. Soldiers patrolled streets with renewed purpose. Citizens repaired damaged homes and marketplaces, and the pulse of daily life resumed its rhythm, tempered by the solemn memory of sacrifice. The red diamond, emblem of unity and strength, shone once more in banners, seals, and hearts alike, a talisman of endurance in a land tested by conflict. Across the provinces, the first coordinated efforts to reclaim lost ground were underway. Imperial generals led battalions into regions previously occupied by Dominion forces, their movements deliberate and strategic. Scouts traced enemy positions, noting vulnerabilities and observing patterns, while cavalry and archers moved in synchronized maneuvers designed to disrupt supply lines and isolate hostile units. Each successful reclaiming of territory, though modest in scale, carried profound symbolic weight, reinforcing the message that the Empire, though tested, retained both power and purpose. Within White-Gold Tower, the Emperor convened council after council, deliberating with generals, diplomats, and advisors alike. Strategies were refined with meticulous care, balancing offense with the need to protect civilians and preserve sacred sites. The red diamond, painted across maps and banners, became a guiding motif for all operations, reminding soldiers and citizens that their combined efforts were not merely tactical, but also emblematic of the unity and continuity that defined Cyrodiil itself. Every decision was measured, every deployment deliberate, and every maneuver carried the weight of both strategy and hope. The citizens themselves played a vital role in this restoration. Artisans rebuilt walls, repaired roads, and reinforced bridges, blending utility with artistry in a tradition long practiced throughout the empire. Priests and spiritual leaders encouraged reflection and patience, guiding communities through ceremonies that celebrated survival, honored the fallen, and instilled resilience. Families, too, participated quietly, sharing provisions, tending injured neighbors, and participating in acts of communal care that strengthened the moral fiber of every city, town, and village touched by the conflict. Even the soldiers, whose days had been filled with the clash of steel and the roar of siege engines, found solace in small, meditative practices. Dawn and dusk were marked with prayer, reflection, and the quiet observance of rituals that linked their present struggle to the enduring legacy of the empire. In these moments, courage was not measured in conquest alone, but in steadfastness, in the refusal to yield, and in the awareness that each act, however small, contributed to the broader tapestry of survival, resistance, and hope. As night fell, the glow of fires lit the city and surrounding countryside, not merely as a sign of vigilance, but as a quiet celebration of regained strength. The red diamond, both emblem and ideal, endured in the minds and hearts of all who had fought, prayed, and labored. Though the Dominion remained a patient and formidable adversary, the Empire had reaffirmed its resilience. Its people, united by faith, courage, and shared purpose, prepared to face the continuing challenges of war, knowing that endurance, strategy, and hope would guide the path forward through both darkness and light. Though the Empire reclaimed territories and restored its influence, the price of these victories weighed heavily upon both soldiers and citizens. Villages once lost to Dominion control bore the marks of occupation. Walls scorched by fire, homes dismantled, fields trampled and left barren. Even as banners of the Red Diamond were raised once more, the quiet murmur of grief threaded through streets and hamlets. Families mourned those who had fallen defending hearth and home, and the living moved with solemn care, mindful of the fragility of triumph and the enduring cost of war. Within White-Gold Tower, the Emperor and his council reflected upon these sacrifices. Generals recounted the losses sustained in retaking towns, repairing fortresses, and securing key trade routes. Soldiers, weary from skirmishes and night watches, tended to both physical wounds and the silent burden of memories that lingered long after battle had ended. Even minor engagements, though tactically successful, had left impressions that reached beyond flesh and stone, shaping the hearts and minds of all who had witnessed them. In the provinces, reconstruction was an exercise in patience and perseverance. Caravans moved slowly along roads cleared of obstacles, carrying supplies to towns still reeling from the Dominion's occupation. Artisans repaired walls, restored bridges, and rebuilt homes with care, blending practicality with artistry, honoring those who had fallen and ensuring that the living could continue to thrive. Priests guided communities in quiet rituals, offering prayers for healing, protection, and endurance, reminding citizens that the strength of the empire lay not only in its armies, but also in the spirit of its people. Amidst the reconstruction, soldiers and scouts continued to secure reclaimed regions. Patrols observed for lingering threats. Ambushes were anticipated and strategic positions reinforced. Even in moments of apparent calm, the lessons of previous engagements lingered, teaching that victory could not be assumed and that the Empire's strength depended on vigilance, unity, and careful planning. Every action, from repairing fortifications to organizing supplies, was imbued with a sense of purpose, the quiet acknowledgement that survival and endurance demanded both courage and prudence. Families, too, played their part in the healing of the land. Children returned to fields once tilled, learning the rhythms of life alongside cautious farmers. Neighbors shared food, water, and labor, and communities gathered for quiet evenings of reflection, storytelling, and remembrance. In these small acts, the pulse of resilience continued, linking the present to both memory and hope. As night fell over Cyrodiil, lanterns flickered in streets scarred but not broken, casting long shadows upon walls and plazas. The red diamond remained a symbol of unity and strength, not merely of conquest, but of collective endurance. Though the Dominion continued to loom as a patient adversary, the Empire had proven its capacity to reclaim, rebuild, and persist. The price of reclamation, though steep, reminded all who had endured that every act of courage, every sacrifice, and every prayer contributed to the enduring heart of the Empire, guiding it steadily forward through both shadow and light. As the flames of battle quieted and the Empire rebuilt its strength, a new chapter of the war unfolded, not upon fields of steel, but within the gilded corridors of diplomacy. The White-Gold Concordat, a treaty wrought from necessity and careful negotiation, emerged as both a symbol of compromise and a reminder of the Empire's delicate position. Envoys, robed in fine silks and carrying letters sealed with wax, traversed great distances to the Somerset Isles, bearing messages tempered with respect and subtle assertion. Each word weighed against the risk of further escalation. Within White-Gold Tower, the Emperor and his council convened under the pale glow of candlelight, reviewing the terms proposed by the Thalmor. Restrictions on worship, mandates of allegiance, and promises of territorial boundaries were parsed meticulously. Every clause, every phrase carried weight. Even the smallest word might influence the perception of sovereignty, honor, or control. The discussions were lengthy, thoughtful, and deliberate, as leaders considered not only the immediate implications, but the long-term impact upon the Empire's unity, morale, and spiritual identity. Across Cyrodiil, citizens sensed the shifting currents of power. Merchants and traders whispered of envoys and negotiations. Priests and devotees contemplated the subtle adjustments to rituals required by the treaty. Soldiers remained vigilant even as direct combat subsided. Though the war's fires had dimmed temporarily, the presence of the Dominion lingered, shaping the rhythm of life in both subtle and tangible ways. The Empire, aware of the delicate balance between compliance and sovereignty, tread carefully, striving to maintain its dignity while avoiding unnecessary provocation. In Aldmeri, the Thalmor observed with patience and calculation. Their emissaries carried themselves with quiet authority, their intentions clear, yet obscured by diplomacy's soft veil. Every demand and every concession was part of a greater strategy, designed to consolidate influence without overextending ambition, to weaken the Empire incrementally while maintaining the appearance of civility. In these exchanges, the War of Shadows unfolded as surely as any battle of steel, its consequences shaping the future of Tamriel as palpably as the fiercest siege. Yet, even within this intricate dance of diplomacy, the heart of the Empire endured. Citizens continued to tend their fields, artisans restored damaged infrastructure, and soldiers trained quietly for the possibility of renewed conflict. Temples remained centers of reflection, offering guidance and solace to all who sought it. The red diamond, though symbolically tested by the treaty, persisted in banners, seals, and hearts, a reminder that unity and resilience were not only matters of policy, but of spirit. As night descended over Cyrodiil, lanterns glimmered in quiet streets, and the Emperor gazed upon the spires of White-Gold Tower with contemplative resolve. Though the White-Gold Concordat had tempered immediate hostilities, it was clear that the Empire's path remained fraught with challenge. Diplomacy, like war, required vigilance, patience, and discernment. And as the citizens of Cyrodiil drifted toward sleep, there was a gentle reassurance in the continuity of governance, faith, and collective endurance, all preserved beneath the enduring light of the red diamond. Though the White-Gold Concordat promised a pause in open conflict, its shadow stretched long across the Empire. Beneath the surface of signed treaties and formal proclamations, currents of unease flowed steadily, unseen yet deeply felt. Soldiers, though momentarily unengaged in battle, maintained vigilance along borders and trade routes. Patrols traversed the countryside with quiet precision, their steps measured against the possibility that the Dominion's patience might yield renewed aggression at any moment. The treaty had not ended the war, It had merely shifted its battleground into subtler realms, where diplomacy and strategy intertwined like shadow and light. Within White-Gold Tower, the Emperor convened discreet councils to address these latent tensions. Advisors debated the delicate balance between adherence to the treaty and the preservation of the Empire's autonomy. Every decision, every deployment of troops, every envoy's word was weighed carefully, for the line between compliance and subservience was narrow, and the consequences of misjudgment could be catastrophic. Even minor disputes among governors or provincial leaders required careful arbitration to prevent escalation, as the Dominion's watchful gaze extended far and wide. The provinces, too, felt the invisible weight of oversight. Temples adjusted rituals to comply with restrictions imposed by the Concordat. Citizens spoke with subtle caution in public forums, and merchants carefully navigated trade agreements under the Dominion scrutiny. Though daily life continued, a pervasive awareness lingered. Autonomy had been constrained, and even small acts of dissent could invite consequences. It was a constant reminder that while open war had paused, the Empire's sovereignty remained under pressure, its endurance tested in the quiet corridors of law, faith, and observation. Even among the military, the sense of vigilance persisted. Officers trained troops in defensive tactics, emphasizing patience and awareness over outright engagement. Scouts monitored Dominion movements along hidden routes, gathering intelligence on troop dispositions and possible maneuvers. Every report, however minor, was considered carefully, for in the quiet of diplomacy, small missteps could be as costly as open battle. The Empire's strength now relied as much on observation, foresight, and coordination as on valor and strength of arms. Among citizens, whispers of dissent and quiet hope intertwined. Families shared news cautiously, priests offered spiritual guidance to soothe unease, and artisans continued to rebuild and fortify, their work both practical and symbolic of resilience. Even in this period of fragile peace, the red diamond endured as a symbol of unity and courage, reminding all that endurance was measured not only in victories, but in the ability to persist under pressure, to maintain dignity and spirit while constrained by unseen forces. As dusk fell upon Cyrodiil, lanterns glimmered in streets and plazas, their light casting long, contemplative shadows over walls still scarred by war. The Concordat, though intended to bring respite, left an enduring tension woven into the fabric of daily life. The Empire remained vigilant, steadfast, and aware that the Dominion's influence, subtle yet pervasive, demanded patience, strategy, and resilience. And as citizens settled into the quiet of night, a gentle reassurance lingered. Even beneath shadows and constraint, the heart of the Empire continued to beat, steadfast, enduring, and unbroken. As the Dominion pressed further into Tamriel, the Empire prepared for a confrontation that would define the course of the war. Cyrodiil, the heart of the Empire, became a fortress of vigilance. Soldiers drilled along city walls, their armor glinting in the soft light of dawn, while archers positioned themselves upon towers and fortifications, ready to unleash volleys upon any who dared approach. Scouts patrolled the countryside, reporting movements of Dominion detachments, their findings guiding the careful deployment of forces. Every action was measured, every maneuver deliberate, for the survival of the Empire now depended on discipline, foresight, and unity. Within White-Gold Tower, the Emperor convened a council of generals, diplomats, and advisors. Maps sprawled across polished tables, detailing roads, rivers, forests, and settlements where troops could be deployed most effectively. Each strategy was discussed at length, balancing defense with the possibility of counterattack. Envoys were dispatched to neighboring provinces to rally support, while reinforcements were called from distant borders. Even minor decisions were treated with gravity, for the Dominion, patient and relentless, would exploit any lapse in judgment with precision. The citizens of Cyrodiil felt the tension as well. Markets operated quietly, trades conducted with vigilance, and children's laughter was tempered by the knowledge that their streets were under watchful eyes. Priests and spiritual leaders moved among the populace, offering prayers for protection and endurance. Candles flickered in chapels and homes, incense spiraled upward, and quiet rituals served to strengthen morale, reminding all who dwelt in the empire that courage was not only a matter of arms, but of spirit and shared purpose. Across the countryside, small skirmishes tested the empire's resolve. Cavalry intercepted Dominion scouts, while infantry defended bridges and passes against probing attacks. Archers and mages coordinated their strikes to disrupt enemy formations and weaken momentum. Even as each battle was minor in scale, their cumulative effect fortified the Empire's defenses and sent a clear signal. Cyrodiil would not yield easily, and the Red Diamond, emblem of unity and resilience, remained unshaken. In towns and villages, citizens contributed to the war effort in quiet, meaningful ways. Artisans repaired walls, reinforced gates, and produced supplies, while families shared resources with soldiers and neighbors alike. These acts, though subtle, were essential. Every brick laid, every lantern lit, every prayer whispered contributed to the preservation of Cyrodiil's heart. The Empire, while challenged on many fronts, drew strength from these intertwined efforts, where courage, faith, and perseverance became as formidable as any legion of soldiers. As dusk fell across the plains and rivers, fires glimmered faintly on distant hills, marking both vigilance and the enduring pulse of life. The Dominion's advance remained constant, patient, and watchful, yet the Empire's heart beat steadily beneath the Red Diamond, fortified by preparation, unity, and the quiet courage of its people. The last stand of Cyrodiil, though still unfolding, had begun with resolve, careful planning, and an unshakable belief that the Empire could endure even against the relentless tide of ambition. The skies above the Imperial City glowed faintly in the distance, as if the heavens themselves bore witness to the growing tension. Fires erupted in outlying districts where skirmishes flared between disciplined Dominion detachments and vigilant Imperial forces. The clash of steel, though muted compared to full-scale battle, echoed through the streets and alleys, a reminder that no corner of the city was untouched by the shadow of war. Citizens moved carefully, their movements deliberate, ensuring that families were guided to safety while scouts and soldiers monitored the advancing threat. Within the walls, the Emperor and his council observed the unfolding events with quiet gravity. Messengers relayed reports from commanders, detailing skirmishes, disrupted supply lines, and pockets of resistance. Strategists considered every angle, weighing the deployment of troops against the need to protect civilians and sacred sites. The Red Diamond, emblem of unity and resilience, flew from banners across White-Gold Tower, a reminder that even amidst fire and shadow, the heart of the Empire remained steadfast, a beacon for those who looked for hope amid uncertainty. Soldiers stationed along the outer defenses moved with precision. Archers took positions upon ramparts, their arrows ready to fly, while infantry patrolled gates and bridges, responding to small incursions with practiced skill. Even as fires consumed the outskirts, the disciplined rhythm of defense persisted, a testament to both training and determination. Cavalry moved through streets and fields, intercepting scouts and foraging parties, while mages reinforced walls and wards, blending art, strategy, and quiet power to hold the city together. In neighborhoods and markets, citizens assisted in subtle ways. Families carried supplies to soldiers, artisans repaired barricades, and priests whispered prayers over the wounded and frightened. The quiet acts of resilience mirrored the larger struggle, showing that even those not wielding weapons contributed to the defense of the city. In the flickering light of evening fires, the people of Cyrodiil bore witness to the endurance of both spirit and home, their collective effort forming an invisible but formidable shield against encroaching chaos. The Dominion, patient and strategic, tested every weak point. Small detachments probed gates, minor skirmishes ignited along trade routes, and spies moved quietly among the populace, reporting both strengths and vulnerabilities. Yet each attempt was met with measured resistance, a blend of force and vigilance that slowly frustrated the advancing enemy. The Empire's response was deliberate, emphasizing endurance, observation, and unity over rash confrontation, understanding that the preservation of the city's heart required both caution and courage. As night fell over the Imperial City, smoke from distant fires glimmered onto the stars, painting the sky with streaks of orange and red. The clash of arms quieted in intervals, replaced by the soft hum of watchful vigilance and whispered prayers. Though the flames over the capital marked danger and sacrifice, they also illuminated the unwavering resolve of a people determined to endure. Beneath the red diamond, the heart of Cyrodiil continued to beat steadily, fortified by strategy, faith, and the enduring courage of all who called the city home. After months of measured struggle and patient endurance, subtle changes began to shift the balance of the war. The Dominion, though relentless and calculated, found its advances slowed by the resilience of the Empire. Patrols and skirmishes revealed new patterns, scouts identified weak points, and the disciplined coordination of Imperial forces began to yield results. Each reclaimed road, village, and hilltop became more than tactical victories. They were symbols of hope, quiet assurances that the Empire's heart could endure even against the patient and unyielding tide of Dominion ambition. White-Gold Tower remained the command center of strategy and reflection. Generals, advisors, and the Emperor himself reviewed reports that detailed both the successes and lingering threats of the campaign. Maps were annotated with positions of both friendly and enemy forces, and contingencies were developed to anticipate movements, strengthen defenses, and enable precise counterattacks. Even minor decisions carried weight, as the Empire knew that the smallest oversight could be exploited by a foe as disciplined and observant as the Thalmor. In the countryside, the Empire's resurgence became tangible. Cavalry units executed swift maneuvers to intercept Dominion detachments, while archers and infantry coordinated ambushes in forested passes and narrow valleys. Supply lines, once threatened, were now reinforced and guarded, allowing trade, communication, and logistics to flow more reliably. Even isolated towns felt the subtle reassurance of Imperial presence, as garrisons returned and citizens rebuilt with newfound confidence, guided by the knowledge that their empire was regaining strength. Citizens themselves contributed quietly yet meaningfully. Farmers restored fields that had lain fallow during earlier skirmishes. Artisans repaired walls and infrastructure, and priests led prayers of gratitude and protection, fostering resilience in both spirit and community. Families shared provisions, guided children safely through recovering streets, and participated in small acts that reinforced the network of unity that defined the Empire's enduring heart. Each action, though modest, wove a larger tapestry of endurance, courage, and hope that complemented the strategic gains of the military. Even as the tide began to turn, vigilance remained paramount. The Dominion's patience and cunning ensured that no advance was unchallenged, and every Imperial success required careful follow-through to secure a lasting advantage. Scouts monitored for new maneuvers, small detachments reinforced reclaimed territory, and soldiers prepared for the possibility of renewed skirmishes at unexpected locations. In this delicate balance of caution and assertiveness, the Empire learned that endurance was both tactical and spiritual, measured in persistence, foresight, and collective resolve. As twilight descended over Cyrodiil, lanterns glimmered across towns, fortresses, and countryside alike. The subtle glow of renewal spread through streets scarred by battle, illuminating the quiet strength of citizens and soldiers alike. Though the Dominion remained a formidable presence, the Empire's resurgence was undeniable. Roads were safer, borders steadier, and the red diamond continued to shine, a beacon of unity, resilience, and hope. In the hush of evening, as people settled into sleep, the Empire felt the first whispers of a turning tide, gentle yet powerful, guiding it steadily toward the promise of enduring strength. The Empire's careful resurgence culminated in a series of decisive engagements that would shape the final phase of the Great War. The Dominion, patient and precise, pressed forward with methodical persistence, yet the coordinated resistance of Imperial forces steadily blunted their advance. Armies clashed along strategic passes, at fortified towns, and across river crossings, each engagement blending careful strategy with disciplined courage. The clash of steel and the silent hum of magic mingled with the rhythm of battle, yet the Empire's forces remained resolute, driven not by haste, but by the enduring certainty that perseverance would yield victory. From White-Gold Tower, the Emperor observed the unfolding maneuvers, guided by intelligence, careful planning, and counsel from generals seasoned by months of conflict. Reports detailed the movement of Dominion detachments, noting strengths, weaknesses, and potential avenues of exploitation. Tactical decisions were deliberate. Infantry reinforced critical positions. Archers and mages coordinated defenses, and cavalry prepared to exploit openings. Each measured action reflected the understanding that in the final confrontation, patience and foresight were as critical as courage and strength. Across the provinces, the people of Cyrodiil bore witness to the Empire's resurgence. Citizens repaired roads and bridges under the careful watch of soldiers, ensuring that supply lines remained uninterrupted. Artisans reinforced fortifications and produced weapons, while priests and spiritual leaders guided communities in quiet reflection and prayer. Families tended to their own, assisted neighbors, and engaged in subtle acts of care that strengthened morale and reinforced the shared sense of purpose that bound the Empire together. Every effort, however small, contributed to a collective endurance that mirrored the disciplined efforts of the military. The Dominion's forces, while formidable, encountered resistance that tested every measure of their strategy. Ambushes disrupted supply lines, garrisons held against sieges, and well-coordinated strikes forced the Thalmor to reconsider their approach. Even as skirmishes flared across the landscape, the Empire's advance was measured, careful, and deliberate, ensuring that gains were consolidated and losses minimized. Victory was not measured in rapid conquest, but in the steady reclaiming of territory, the protection of citizens, and the assertion of sovereignty under the Red Diamond. As dusk descended over Cyrodiil, fires from distant battles glimmered against the horizon, yet their light illuminated resilience rather than despair. The Red Diamond remained a symbol of unity and endurance, a reminder that the Empire's heart, though tested by war and shadow, continued to beat with measured strength. In the quiet moments between skirmishes, citizens, soldiers, and leaders alike reflected on sacrifice, courage, and perseverance, understanding that the final confrontation was not only a battle of arms, but of spirit, patience, and enduring hope. The night settled gently over the land, offering a pause for reflection even amidst tension. Lanterns flickered in towns, prayers rose from temples, and watchful sentinels kept vigil. Though the Dominion remained a persistent adversary, the Empire had demonstrated that through unity, careful planning, and collective resilience, even the most calculated foe could be met with steadfast courage. The final confrontation, though still unfolding, revealed that the heart of Cyrodiil, guided by the Red Diamond, could endure, resist, and ultimately shape the future of Tamriel. With the final confrontations behind them, the Empire entered a period of quiet reflection. The Dominion, patient and deliberate, had been met with measured resistance, and the Red Diamond remained a symbol not only of sovereignty, but of resilience, endurance, and unity. White-Gold Tower, though scarred by months of conflict, glimmered once more in the morning sun, its spires catching light as if to remind all who gazed upon it that hope could endure even after long shadows had passed. The streets of Cyrodiil, slowly returning to daily rhythm, bore the subtle signs of survival, reconstruction, and cautious optimism. Citizens moved through plazas and markets with a gentle attentiveness, mindful of both past sacrifices and present opportunities. Families repaired homes, tending gardens and marketplaces alike, while artisans restored damaged buildings with care and quiet artistry. Soldiers, still vigilant, patrolled borders and towns, not in anticipation of immediate threat, but as a measured precaution, a symbol of the Empire's enduring responsibility to its people. Even the smallest acts, lighting lanterns, repairing bridges, offering aid to neighbors, contributed to the renewal of life and spirit across the provinces. Within White-Gold Tower, the Emperor convened councils not of war, but of reflection and strategy for peace. Advisors recounted the lessons of months of conflict, noting where patience had triumphed over haste, where diplomacy had tempered action, and where collective resilience had shaped outcomes more enduring than any battlefield victory. Reports from generals, scouts, and envoys painted a picture of the Empire strengthened not only by arms, but by unity, foresight, and the quiet determination of its citizens. Every decision now carried a weight of wisdom forged in the crucible of struggle. Temples and shrines became centers of quiet contemplation. Priests offered prayers of gratitude for survival, guidance for the future, and solace for the sorrow of those lost. Candles flickered in the soft evening air. Incense spiraled gently skyward, and citizens of all ages found comfort in rituals that had endured for centuries. In this period of calm, the spiritual and civic life of the Empire intertwined, reminding all that the strength of the Red Diamond lay as much in the hearts of its people as in the might of armies or the majesty of fortresses. Beyond the city, across hills, rivers, and reclaimed lands, small acts of care and vigilance continued. Farmers tended fields, trade routes reopened gradually, and villages restored the rhythm of life. Each stone laid, and each meal shared, reinforcing a network of endurance that had sustained the Empire throughout the war. Even as night fell, stars reflecting softly on rivers and lakes, the sense of calm was imbued with the quiet knowledge that vigilance, wisdom, and collective courage remained essential, guiding the Empire toward a future shaped by reflection, unity, and hope. As Cyrodiil settled into the gentle hush of evening, the Red Diamond shone not only from banners and seals, but in the hearts of all who had endured. Peace, though fragile and tempered by memory, now wove its subtle light through streets and fields, temples and towers, promising that the Empire, resilient and enduring, could face the days ahead with measured strength and quiet confidence. In this twilight, the Empire reflected on both the cost of war and the enduring power of unity, patience, and hope. Even as the fires of conflict faded, the echoes of the Great War lingered across Tamriel, shaping the Empire in subtle yet enduring ways. The Dominion's presence, though restrained by treaties and careful diplomacy, reminded the people that vigilance and wisdom remained essential. Citizens moved through streets scarred but not broken, their footsteps a gentle testament to endurance, their voices carrying the quiet rhythm of life renewed. The Red Diamond, now not only a symbol of unity but also of perseverance, adorned banners, seals, and hearts alike, reminding all that the Empire's strength lay in shared purpose and steadfast resilience. Within White-Gold Tower, the Emperor and Council reflected upon the lessons of conflict. Reports chronicled both victories and losses, noting how patience, strategy, and collective will had shaped outcomes as surely as the clash of steel. Diplomacy, once secondary to the immediacy of battle, now took center stage. Envoys maintained cautious dialogue with the Dominion, navigating agreements while preserving the Empire's sovereignty and spiritual traditions. Decisions were measured, deliberate, and mindful of both history and the fragile peace that had been forged through struggle and sacrifice. Across the provinces, citizens worked quietly to rebuild. Villages restored roads, repaired bridges, and cultivated fields left fallow by months of disruption. Artisans restored homes and fortresses, blending function with beauty to honor both the living and those who had fallen. Priests and spiritual leaders guided communities in reflection and ritual, helping citizens to process grief, commemorate courage, and embrace hope for the future. Even small acts, like lighting candles in windows or sharing meals with neighbors, reinforced the subtle network of resilience that had carried the Empire through its darkest hours. Soldiers continued to patrol borders and towns, not in anticipation of immediate threat, but as guardians of the lessons learned. Training, observation, and vigilance remained constant, reminders that peace, though cherished, was fragile. Scouts reported slowly shifting Dominion movements, while strategists reviewed plans and contingencies, ensuring that the Empire's response would remain measured, deliberate, and effective should conflict arise again. The heart of Cyrodiil, though scarred, remained vigilant, tempered by experience and strengthened by unity. As nights settled across cities, plains, and forests, a quiet peace enveloped the land. Lanterns flickered in streets, fires burned softly in hearths, and stars reflected upon rivers and lakes, casting gentle light over the enduring landscape. The red diamond, emblem of unity and perseverance, shone not only upon banners and towers, but in the hearts of those who had endured, guiding the Empire toward a future defined by wisdom, reflection, and careful guardianship. Though the Great War had tested every facet of the Empire, it had also revealed its capacity for resilience, courage, and unity, leaving a legacy that would endure for generations. In the hush of evening, as citizens drifted toward sleep and the world settled into quiet, the lessons of the Great War were clear. Vigilance, patience, and collective will were as vital as any army, and the heart of the Empire, steadfast beneath the red diamond, would continue to endure, to guide, and to inspire for all the days yet to come.